My name is Cherrie Daniels, the Cultural Attaché at the U.S. Mission in Germany, and I'm here to welcome into the embassy today and to have a discussion with Michael Lederer, a playwright and the author of Casual Baggage. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Cherrie. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So please tell us about your play, Casual Baggage, and I know it's a dramatized version of your family's own history. What is the story?
Well, I was born 1956 in Princeton, and that was 12 years and about 1 million miles away from the day in July 1944 when my family, my father Ivo, his sister Mira, and their parents Otto and Ruja were very, very lucky to get on the only ship of Jewish refugees, of refugees from Europe, brought to America during World War II. 982 made it onto that ship that sailed from Naples. And when I was a child, I didn't know that story, and I didn't know that world, because being born as I was in the northeast of America, about as lucky as it gets, and the family sort of protected, wanted to preserve that childhood view of things. And it wasn't until much, much later I came to know the danger that they had known, and that's true for all Holocaust, the families of Holocaust survivors. We, the next generation or the next two generations, we want to understand, and we try to understand, but it's very hard to do when you grew up as I did, little American passport tucked into my diaper. So the play actually, I would say, began after my father died in 1998. I went to Krakow in Poland for a theater conference, and the lecture I was going to hear was canceled, and so I had unexpectedly the day free, and I decided to go to Auschwitz, something I had planned to do for a long time. And I got there, and I hadn't really prepared to go. It was unexpected. And it was a warm day, and I had had a full breakfast. And I thought to myself, this is really not the way in which I want to see this place. And so I determined this hellscape. So I determined to come back in the winter, coldest, grayest day I could find, and I did that. And I didn't eat dinner the night before, and I didn't eat breakfast, and it was cold. And even then, I walked around thinking, I am here by choice. All I have to do is, go an hour away. I've got safety and warmth and a meal waiting for me. And so I think that was the beginning of the idea for the play. The difference between what it means to be the child of a Holocaust survivor versus a generation that knew that experience firsthand.
Okay. And I know that we've met a number of times, and on one of those, it was when the U.S. Embassy in Berlin organized the European premiere of a new documentary series, The U.S. and the Holocaust. Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, and Lynn Novick. So when we organized that premiere here in Berlin, we noticed in such a heavy clip reel of 70 minutes or so of the 6-hour series that it's highlighted for us in that film the shortcomings of U.S. policy during World War II, when we should have done more. We should have let more refugees into the country, and maybe, as I read in your play, you thought and understood that we had, only to find out maybe more of the shortcomings as time went on. So In the play, the Michael in the play says, "I had always just assumed we had rescued so many." Is there a false equivalence in focusing on the fact that the U.S. didn't save more refugees because it takes away, in a certain way, maybe from remembering the atrocities of the Holocaust that were committed by the Nazis and their allies and accomplices throughout Europe?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's the very nature of those atrocities that made it incumbent on us and anyone who could possibly reach out a hand to help more. The fact is that, millions being slaughtered, we knew about it. There's ample State Department, archive of the cables flying back and forth. We knew. And yet the obstructionists, in particular in the State Department of its day, under Cordell Hull and this, I have to snarl when I say the name, Breckinridge Long, Undersecretary of State for problems arising from the war, they very intentionally did not allow Jewish refugees they didn't assist. There was talk of taking them to North Africa, which had been liberated, and there were camps available. No help given. And for 982 to have been brought to America on a single ship in the course of years, in which again millions are being slaughtered. No, I think it's nice that Ken Burns put and Sarah and Lynn put a moment about that story into their film, but it was only a very, very brief moment. People don't really know this story. I have friends who grew up in Oswego who didn't know about it. And it's vital. That was the only, in Oswego, New York, was the only emergency refugee shelter established in America for less than 1,000. We could almost fit 1,000, in this room or the adjoining room. What happened, and the reason for the title, by the way, Casual Baggage, is they were brought on this ship. As they sailed past the Statue of Liberty, the refugees, including my dad and my aunt and grandparents, they had to wear these tags, these cardboard tags, identifying them as U.S. military casual baggage, because they were not immigrants. They had no legal status. And they were then taken by train from Hoboken up to Oswego, New York, where they were put, to their surprise, behind barbed wire on an old U.S. military camp, and they were not to leave. And they were kept there for 18 months. And so they were safe, but they were not free. My father always said, when he spoke about it, he had a sort of a very positive disposition, and he knew how lucky he was, how lucky they were. So he never complained about that. How many people would have so happily traded their circumstances for being locked safely in this camp. But the fact is that they were still treated as casual baggage. And there is a line, I'll end this answer by saying, there's a line in the play where Ivo, my father, looks out a window and he says to Michael, two kinds of people in this world, sweetheart. Both hear a child screaming in pain out in the street. One rushes out to help. The other closes the window at once, not to be bothered. And I think the play, as I've written it, tries to speak to that instinct. When I hear a child crying, if I'm on the train or the bus, it's not my kid, but I feel for it. Mm-hmm. I don't want anybody's child to be suffering. And if you can help, you do. It's what I teach my children. It's what I was taught. Mm-hmm. And so to turn a blind eye at a moment like that, there have been many moments in history. This isn't the only genocide. Right. And so the play speaks to, do we do we extend a hand to help, or do we close that window?
That's right. And I know from, other talks and events surrounding this type of subject, and from some of the training that's conducted at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, that some of the language taught in schools and civics and in history and others is nowadays is, being an upstander and not a bystander, and trying to raise upstanders, and so the goal of a lot of this types of education is how do you nurture that instinct to be an upstander, to take that risk. What are the risks that one can take in order to intervene and save and to rescue and to help render assistance when you can. And so that's super interesting. So another line from your father, or Ivo, in the play is where he says, "We don't study history to understand the past. The past is over, gone, finished, water under the bridge. No, we study history to understand today and tomorrow." What can we learn from your play to build a better future, using it as sort of if you think of it in an educational lens?
Well, my father went on. He was 11. He was 14 actually when they came. 16 when they were finally allowed to stay after the war had ended, and he went on to become to get his PhD from Princeton. I think you were at Princeton also.
For undergrad, that's right.
Yeah, he got his PhD there, and he became a professor of European diplomatic history at Princeton, Yale, Stanford. So I grew up Princeton, New Haven, Palo Alto. And he was determined. The reason that he went into that field, it's an interesting story. He didn't quite make it in. He got a letter back from Princeton saying, "Dear Mr. Lederer, very sorry, we're only able to accept 10 students." And he borrowed $50 from his parents. He jumped on a bus at Port Authority. He went there, insisted on seeing the chairman of the department, and he said, "Look, you have to understand, my application was based not on the good grades and the fact that I speak 6 languages and recommendations. It was because I have seen war firsthand. I have worn that yellow star, and I am determined to give back what's been given to me so graciously by being an American, naturalized, and I want to do what I can to prevent, wars in the future." So diplomatic history. I think the lesson here is to say that those of us who are lucky enough to sit in warmth and safety, we have a responsibility beyond just enjoying our lives. Giving something to help others, so that the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And if we behave like that, it's a bigger story than one event, as enormous as the event was. If we help this sounds, I'm an old hippie from the 60s, right? Peace and love. Mm-hmm. So this goes back to that. If we can help each other, it's a very different human story.
So influencing not reading the history, but influencing history in the future.
Influencing, and that's again in the play. My father really suffered. He died young because of cancer, and we were lying on the ground. He had already been diagnosed, and we were lying on the lawn one day up in the Berkshires, Massachusetts, and he said, "Sweetheart, the tragedy of my life is that in the end, I was not a Johnson, I was a Boswell," meaning to historians, that he had recorded history rather than actually making it.
Well, he gave himself a harsh grade. He was very hard on himself.
He was hard on himself,
but
he wanted to do more, and it's how frustrating to know that the lights are about to go out. Mm-hmm. And going back to one's, youthful idealism, mm-hmm. I was going to fix this and I was going to do that. Mm-hmm. And, and one does as much as one can. He did a great deal. I'm so proud of him. Mm-hmm. And by the way, one of the joys of writing this play was I got to hang out with my dad for the 2 years or so in which I've been working on it. Every morning, cup of coffee, hang out with Dad.
Yeah, he's very present in the play. The presence comes through.
Yeah.
So there are many voices from the past that are part of the group of refugees that were brought to Oswego. I only get to interact with the ones that are in the play. But in your play, you chose to introduce a new character, Rada, a young African-American woman. Why did you include her in this, and how does that fit in with the other characters? And if you have time at the end, you can tell me if there's any connection to the Yugoslav name Rada, or if it was just because of the academic artistic institute after which she is named. But anyway, that's a side story.
Yeah.
Including Rada, a young African-American, into this story.
Right.
How did that come about, and what do you take? What should we take from that?
Because while the story focuses on the Jewish genocide in the 1940s, 30s, 40s, it tries to speak to the bigger question, which is one tribe feeling the superior to another tribe, and it could be this group and that group, or another group and another group. So I think at the essence of the illness there is I'm better than you-ism. So whether it was Germany of the 40s and Jews, or whether it's just fill in the as I realized, because of the first comment I made, that I was sort of frustratingly a bit limited in understanding what that had been like, because again, I had the wind at my back, the way I grew up. And my father had an old housekeeper, a wonderful black woman named Cherrie. And he called her his housekeeper, his dear friend, and his psychiatrist, because those two would talk over the years. They really became very close friends. And I was a naughty little teenager, and he would, Cherrie, you can't believe what Michael's doing now. Mm-hmm. And one day she said to me, now Michael, never forget your father and your grandparents, they went through a lot so that you could grow up as lucky and as safely as you are. So don't make it harder for them, Michael. You take it a little easy on them. I love her. I've never forgotten that. So when I came to write the play, in the very first draft, I tried to write Cherrie into it as a character, because I thought she had lost her father. He was murdered for being black. When I was a boy, Jim Crow was still in the South. So there were parallels there. And I think the reason those two, it was a sincere friendship. They understood something about what the other had been through. So I thought I'll put Cherrie in as a way of highlighting that this is a bigger question about people being treated not for who they are, but for what they are. Shame on us. Shame on us for thinking any one baby is better than another baby. And the problem is, as I tried to write Cherrie, I couldn't do it authentically. She didn't have much education, and the neighborhood where she had grown, I was faking it. I just couldn't do it. So I thought, all right, I will create a young, educated Black American to achieve what I had wanted to do with Cherrie, but in a way that I could write it more authentically. So Rada, also Rada is 20 in the play. Evo, my father is 60. I'm 40. Rada is 20. That gives the cast a broader demographic. A woman as well as the two men,
right.
Black as well as white. And the name Rada is because in the play she attended Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, which is called Rada. So that's the story, and she's absolutely key to the telling of this story.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoyed reading the lines and the interchanges with her. So your play ends on a hopeful note, as much as one can with a topic of this type. And the fact that you, as an American, a Jewish American from a family that survived the horrors of the Nazi period, and that you're raising a family here in Berlin, supports that hopefulness. Can we be hopeful that the majority of people in the U.S. and Europe will fight back the tendencies that our societies both have to stoke ancient hatreds and resentments against whoever is the other in the moment, and that we will be able to combat anti-Semitism successfully, in particular, in addition to other hatreds?
Absolutely. I'm absolutely optimistic, and it's a well-grounded optimism, because if you think of the advances that we've made over the last centuries, even, you know, from time of the Enlightenment, and through the Renaissance, and then American civil rights history, and one thing is that we don't, when we pick up the newspaper, I'll use the old analog model, when we, you know, scroll through our thing, you know, you never read about the airplane that took off and landed safely. You don't read about this city council or that Senate where, you know, the two sides sat down, talked, reached a compromise, and advances were made. We only read about the problems.
Right.
So we read every day, and more, and it's daunting and it's frightening, and it takes a lot to sort of push through this. Of course, we read about resurgent anti-Semitism and racism, and it's being sanctioned, you know, in places where it ought not to be sanctioned and encouraged. But the fact is that the rhythm, the bigger rhythm that we seem to be following is, optimistically, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It is a better world to be in today if you are Jewish or black or gay or left-handed or whatever, you know, other sort of describes you. It is better. And I think that, you know, the squeaky ones making all the noise are the ones, there's another line in the play, my father, excuse me, my father says, to love hate, a little design flaw there.
Right.
There are people who love hate. It's their drug, you know? March with those torches and rally and stuff. So, and we read about them, it makes exciting press. But most of us want to get along. And I think that the numbers speak out that, for instance, you mentioned Berlin.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been my home now for 20 years. And before this, I lived in Manhattan. I am most comfortable in a place where we're all from all over. You know, no one cares that, you know, that I look like this or look like that or come from here or come from there. We're all, by being from other places, somehow we're all the same. And so I'm raising my 3 children here. Lucas, Alex, Katerina. I think it's a beautiful place for them to march forward. Maybe
there's something to that, of making sure that we bring enough people who don't have that experience where they are into, you know, in this idea of exchanging or moving or bringing people to a place like Berlin or a place, certain cities in the United States where that is the norm, versus other towns and villages and cities where the norm might be never left here, everyone's like me here, you know. So maybe mixing people together in a way that they wouldn't naturally if they didn't get that opportunity.
I think that's one reason that we find it's a common demographic political divide, whether it's in the States or in Europe, rural versus urban. Because in urban settings, you know, we tend to be more progressive because we're exposed much more. I mean, I go past the little Asian market, and then I've got the Turkish place, and you know, there's the Italian, you know, and every part of every day.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in a village, more isolated, and I love village life, I've lived in wonderful little villages, and but if everybody that you know, is eating the same stuff for breakfast and dressing the same and stuff, it becomes harder to accept that this one might have a different set of habits and that one different set of habits.
Yeah.
As I walked here, came to the embassy today, I saw in Pariser Platz, which is just over there, a huge menorah right next to the huge Christmas tree. And for me, that's what it's about. Let everybody just be. And this need to feel like, like I'm better than you, it's like tall shoes on a short man. It's an artificial sense. You don't have to be better than somebody else. You're just fine the way you are.
Right.
And I'm fine the way I am. Thank you very much.
So tell me, what are the next steps that you're planning for the play? Is it done? Where does it go from here, and what do you envision for its future?
Well, it's still sort of hot off the press. It's just finished. As far as these things go. I've been very, very lucky. I got a commission November 2019 to write this, a commission from a Broadway producer. And that's how the life of this play began. And I thought the terms of our contract were such that I was to produce a first and a second draft within about 3 months.
Okay.
Well, it took me 3 years instead of 3 months, because I had to really carve out how to tell the story, and not as simple as it seems.
Right. It looks simple when you read it at the end. That's a great construction, but it didn't come. Yeah.
Well, from the very first day, I knew this is a story about a tiny, lucky group of 982 who get on a single ship and come to America and are kept behind barbed wire, and in the end, they're allowed in. But dramatically, that was a problem, because the audience coming in is going to know these guys make it. These guys make it, so you don't have that dramatic tension of will they or won't they. Secondly, the business of being confined behind barbed wire, as uncomfortable and frightening as that was, especially for the adults. For my dad, it was an adventure, but for the kids, it's nothing to complain about in the context of what others were going through during the Holocaust. So I was very lucky to have help along the way developing. COVID came. I sent the second draft on March 12th, 2020, which was the day that the theaters shuttered close in New York. So perfectly understandable that producer had to leave the project. She had other plays of hers that needed to be rebooted. But then I've had over 3 years help. It was a 25 cast version, then it was a 15 cast version, and then a 9, and now a 6. So now it's manageable. One doesn't need a Broadway-sized budget. It can be done by theaters anywhere. And I had to come to understand how to tell the story. And John Guare is a Tony Award-winning playwright. He's an old friend. He helped me reading a couple of drafts, giving notes. Robert Kelly, who was longtime artistic director of Theater Works in Palo Alto, old friend. Kelly helped me enormously, likewise, with sets of notes. Shirley Fishman, who's a great dramaturg from La Jolla Playhouse. So even though I was sort of, in my little room here in Berlin, like that, thanks to this miracle of, email and the telephone, I still get excited. Well, I can't believe we can do this. Just talk to anyone, anywhere. So I've had help, and now the play, I think, has found its footing. And
is there? There's something. Is there going to be like a launch, and in this area or in the United States, or where do you see that sort of rollout?
Yeah. I won't put the cart before the horse
Okay.
and name, but we're not talking with two different theaters.
Okay.
But in the meantime, you guys here at the embassy, being so wonderfully supportive, I want to give another shout out to Martina Cole, who here at the embassy,
Which I will share in that shout out.
yeah,
Absolutely.
to you also. But Martina has helped me, you know, with this project, with past projects. I mean, wonderful sort of wind at the back for American creatives here in Berlin. And so, thanks to you and the embassy, we're doing on January 23rd at English Theater Berlin. There's going to be a staged reading of not the whole play, but much of it. 5 actors have been hired, and then there'll be an onstage discussion afterwards. So if anyone is in Berlin, January 23rd, English Theater, 8 o'clock, please come and see the baby being born.
Absolutely. Fantastic. No, I hope to, and I know that we have some students that will be definitely part of that, to hear that initial reading. To see it go from paper to dramatic reading will be really something, and then to come into production. So with that, I'll say thank you to playwright Michael Lederer, who's joined us today to talk about his new play, Casual Baggage. And we're really pleased to have gotten the chance to discuss it before while it's still hot off the presses. So thank you for being with us here in the embassy.
Thank you very, very much.
Pleasure.
Cheers.